Welcome to The More You Can, Left Scotland's newest weekly show where I take a complex event or idea and try to explain it as quickly as possible. And the best part is, you, the audience, get to decide what each episode is about. Just leave a note of what you'd like to see covered next in the comments below and I'll pick which one to cover. And that could be Jeremy Corbyn's People's Quantitative Easing or Citizens' Income or whatever you want. But for this week, I'll be looking at the recent electoral court case of the People versus Alistair Carmichael. How did it all start, what's been happening in the trial, and what has it exposed with the nature of our political system. So, cut back to April of 2015, the general election campaign is in full swing. Ed Miliband hasn't grown a beard yet, the Conservatives are busy saying that a vote for the SNP would let Labour in by the back door, and Jim Murphy was just starting to realise his claim that Labour weren't going to lose a single seat was actually going to be true, but not in the way that he had meant. In the end, there was a single seat that they did not lose after all. The beginning of April was also when the press got very excited over a leaked memo from the Scotland office that claimed Nicola Sturgeon secretly wanted the Conservatives to win the general election, thus dredging up all the tired stereotypes of the tartan Tories. Except despite running straight to press with it, things began to unravel pretty quickly. Yes, the Telegraph, who published the story, being that bastion of journalism that it is, hadn't actually approached either Nicola Sturgeon or the French ambassador who she was reported to have made the claim to for a comment. All they had was a single memo that even the civil servant who wrote it doubted was correct. And they doubted it because the information was, by this point, fourth hand. The civil servant was making a note of something that the Consul General had said to them, who had been referring to a conversation that they'd been having with the French ambassador, who was in turn talking about a conversation that they had had with Nicola Sturgeon. So, by this point, who knows what was actually said? The story starts unravelling fast as both Sturgeon and the French ambassador categorically state that this never actually was said, and there seems to have been some miscommunication. So now the Scottish Labour politicians hastily deleting tweets left, right and centre, while the Telegraph continues to plough ahead and act like it doesn't have egg all over its face from some pretty shoddy journalism. Nobody can quite decide on Twitter whether to call it Frenchgate or Nicky Leaks, and everyone is denying the leaked memo has anything to do with them. Until Alistair Carmichael steps forward and says that the leak came from the Scotland office, the branch of the UK government that represents Westminster issues in Holyrood and vice versa. Now Carmichael won't actually name who did it though, except that by this point, I already knew that the Liberal Democrats were responsible for the leak. See, the press release that went out included a statement from Willie Rennie, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, a man who is not even nearly the first person any journalist would go to for a statement following the leak. No offence, Willie. That raised the question of why he was being quoted, unless the Lib Dems had in fact leaked the story. So, to everyone who doubted my theory at the time, listen up. I'm smart, you're dumb, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong, and
there's nothing you can do about it.
Carmichael went as far as saying that during the election period, these things happened, but more importantly, he denied he had anything to do with it. See, at the time, Alistair Carmichael was the Secretary of State for Scotland. That means he ran the Scotland office and was effectively the man in charge of representing Scottish issues in Westminster Parliament. Can you imagine if the guy in charge of representing Scottish issues in Westminster Parliament was actually using his position of power to leak memos to try and smear the First Minister of the country he was meant to be representing? Wait a second. So the story disappears for a little while as an investigation takes place and it largely blows over. That is until news breaks that the man behind the curtain was in fact Alistair Carmichael all along. He writes a letter to Sturgeon admitting guilt before the inquiry into the leak ousts him, stating in it that he knows the account of the First Minister's conversation with the French Minister is not correct. Not that that stopped him from leaking it in the first place. Now, here's where things get a little bit more complex. The news did not break until after the general election. By this point, there's only one elected Liberal Democrat left in Scotland, and that happens to be Carmichael in the Shetland and Orkney constituency. So, a few people who feel like this might have been a gross dereliction of duty raise that a by-election should be held in light of new evidence on the character of Mr Carmichael that wasn't available in the run-up to the election. But Carmichael's defence is that he's already been punished enough by the scandal, and he decides that he won't take his severance pay from leaving his position of being a minister as part of that punishment. It's great being able to decide your own punishment when you break the rules. Last time I was arrested, I simply told the chap I'd not eat chocolate for a month and he seemed satisfied and let me go. It looked like this whole revelation that Carmichael being behind the leak wasn't going to go anywhere. No by-election, no consequences, until some folk from his constituency said that wasn't good enough and started a crowdfunder to cover legal proceedings. And if there's anything that post-referendum Scotland loves, it's a good crowdfunder. They raised over £60,000 to start a legal bid to have him removed as an MP. And that brings us up to the last few days. The problem is, Carmichael isn't on trial for lying about the leak. He's admitted that already. He's not even on trial for causing the leak. Instead, he is on trial under Section 106 of the Representation of the People Act. This means that in order to lose his seat, he must be proven to have done two things. firstly, lied about someone's character, and secondly, to have lied about their personal and not political character. It's sort of tricky to get your head around, especially when you consider that the character he is accused of lying about is in fact himself. Okay, let's take a step back. Section 106 of the Act allows a court to void an election if it can be shown that there have been false statements made towards a candidate with regards to their personal character with the intention of affecting their return to office. That's the criteria that must be met. And in this case, the petitioners are accusing Carmichael of making a false statement with regards to himself. It isn't even about the leak. This is about his attempt to cover it up. By denying he knew anything about the leak, he intended to preserve his personal reputation so as to encourage people to vote for him and return him to office. The bill was written to stop others from slandering their opponents falsely, but it can technically work this way too. But whether or not the judges will see it that way is another matter, which really raises a bigger question here. When an elected representative, especially one in a position such as the Secretary of State for Scotland, deliberately lies and leaks documents with the intention of smearing another party, why do we have to jump backwards through hoops to build a confusing legal case against them to see them removed from their seat? Carmichael's defence has argued that the law should not be used this way, and that it could have major consequences down the line, in that it sets a precedent for politicians caught lying to be tried in court for it, as if that's a bad thing. This case is important, and for a number of reasons. First of all, for STV who broadcast it. Honestly, well done. This is the first time a UK court hearing has been broadcast in full, and STV have made it possible for folk in the remote Orkney and Shetland Islands to actually watch what has been happening, even if it was remarkably dull. Secondly, it's also important because once again, the people of Scotland have shown that they can come together and use new technology to tackle the establishment by creating a crowd-funded legal campaign. And thirdly, this is important because, as Carmichael's lawyer said, it does set a precedent. Will it be that when a politician corrupts and abuses their position, lies for gain, and deceives the electorate, that they will be brought to justice by the very people they try to trick? Or will it be that you can lie as much as you want and get away with it, as long as you're only telling political lies? Does it become the beginning of something bigger, or another example of how these things happen? We'll have to wait and see whether or not the judges rule that the case can move ahead. But for now, that's it for this episode of The More You Can. Please like, share and subscribe. Also, do leave comments below on what you would like to see covered in next week's episode. There will be more programmes throughout the week, so stay tuned, and I will see you all again soon.